Welcome to the Vue workshop. This is just going to be a brief introduction to Vue and Vue 3. Not going to cover all the features. So, introduction. So, Vue.js is like an open source front end framework developed by Vue. So it started off as like a personal project in 2014, and now has grown and is currently maintained by a community of developers, where Evan is the I guess we can call him like the lead developer. And I guess the biggest difference in comparison to things like frameworks like React and Angular is that it's like maintained by developers. React is maintained and developed by Meta. Angular maintained and developed by Google. So why do we use Vue.js? We use it mainly to develop web UIs and single page applications. Vue is like a simple, small and performant framework, and it combines HTML, CSS and JavaScript into reusable components. Does anyone actually not know what single page applications are? I can briefly explain it. Basically it's just a single page application is where you just have like a boilerplate HTML file, and then the JavaScript is responsible for creating all the elements and the interactivity. And I'll probably show it as well when I do my demo, but yeah, so the JavaScript is mainly responsible for creating all the elements and doing all the interactivity and so on. So now Vue 3, so this is actually the first time we're doing like an intro to Vue 3. So Vue 3 is now at a stable release with that particular version. Can now be created using a new scaffolding tool called Create Vue, which is based on Vite. So Vite is also developed by Vue, and it's basically a build tool that's like really fast and does what's known as hot module replacement. So hot module replacement is like when you have your application running, if you make any changes, you will see it pretty much straight away like occur. Like in the past, we've used what's known as like the Vue CLI, so that's now under maintenance and it's no longer recommended. So yeah, that's how you basically create a Vue application, a Vue project. So Vue uses what's known as, or allows us to create what's known as single file components with the .vue file extension, and it basically like you can define all the core components or core elements in that component. So you've got like your JavaScript logic, your HTML structure, CSS styling, all in one page or one component. Now there are two ways of writing single file components, or two API styles. One's the options API, which is like what they now call the way that used to be done in Vue 2. And it basically focuses on like the component instance, and all the logic is like implemented inside of an object. And now like the new like the other approach is the composition API. So that basically implements all the logic using API functions. Some of the benefits of like the composition API in comparison to the options API that the logic can be reused, and it's like better organized. Like one thing you can do is like if you've got like logic that you want to share across all your components, you can sort of grab all that logic and use it or copy that into like a single JavaScript file, and then sort of import that all into your components. The way that used to be done in like Vue 2 was known as mixins, but this is probably the more preferred approach now. So you can use both approaches or both API styles in like for the same scenario, but like the Vue docs recommend that you use the options API in simple scenarios, whereas the composition API for building applications with Vue. So I've got an example of a single file component using the composition API. So we've got script tag at the top. So the script tag defines your JavaScript logic, and the composition API is used with what's known as like the setup attribute. You've then got your template, which is your HTML structure, and then you've got your CSS styling. And I'll get back to this in a second. We've got your options API example. So this is the JavaScript tag, the script tag, which is again JavaScript logic. HTML structure, CSS styling. So notice how here I am, or the way it's defining its logic is using, as I mentioned before, like it's exporting an object, so it's all defined within an object, then it's got like a function which is known as data, and then that's returning an object which has got like a property key value pair, and that values like the CFC number 1 message or string. Whereas in here you're importing a function or ref function, and you're defining your state this way instead. Does that make sense? Or yep, cool. So props are a custom attribute that you can register on your component. So the code from the slides before are slightly edited. So I'm using, in this case, using a function that's known as define props. So you don't actually need to import this. This is already actually inbuilt. Then I'm providing it an array with the the prop that I'm the prop that I'm using. So I guess it says here that we're leaving it for the page to decide that uses this component, but props are mainly used for like if you've got your parent component and then you're passing in values to your child component. The way you do it is through props. And it basically allows your components to be reused better compared to just hard coding your state instead. And you can also have multiple props by adding it to the props array like this. And then you've got, this is the options API example. So over here I'm got like a key value pair again, so props, and then an array with the prop name, and you can add multiple props as well. And then in the template, we're accessing that value. So the way you do in Vue is using double curly brackets. Same example here. You can also define prop types. So instead of using an array and specifying like the name of your, or just like giving the name of your prop, you can use like an object instead, and then you can provide it like the type of it. So in this example, you've got name and then string, age, which is like a number. Likewise, this is the options API way, and it's pretty much a similar process. And directives. So directives are special attributes that convey meaning to Vue. So so they've got, you basically recognize them by using like the prefix in front of it, which is like v. So you've got like vbind, vtext, vif. I'll be going over some of these in my demo, but so it says you guys should research what some of these mean after this workshop. All right, I will get onto the demo. Does that all sort of make sense, or am I going too fast? No? Yep. All right, demo time. So I have prepared, so I created like a little repo here, or a Vue app. Is this still recording? Yep. And what I'm going to build is like a jobs board. So basically a place where jobs are listed, and then you can search for them. I've already got like a JSON file which has got some dummy data, I guess you can call it, and I'll be using the data from here in my application. Okay, I guess I will get started. So, actually, before I start, as I mentioned, so you've got, this is sort of the index.html file that I was talking about, which is basically like the boilerplate, and then you've got like, it's basically just got like one div which has got like an ID, which is app, and then in your, or in the, like it's, like the Vue application is basically,
Can you make it a bit bigger?
Increase the, yeah, is it too small? Sorry. Okay, how do I do that? Is it Control Plus? Is that all right? More?
There you go.
Okay. Is that better? Okay. Yeah. So basically, this is where all the JavaScript logic is basically being applied to that index.html page. So you're mounting the Vue application to that div. Where did it go? Here. Okay. So I'll get started with. Actually, where's Dom? Your laptop's. Oh no, it's fine. Cool. Sorry, went to sleep for a second. Okay, so this is this is sort of like the file structure for a Vue application. You've got your source, which has got the components. I actually, by default, the Vue app actually comes with some components and icons, but I've actually got rid of them for this demo. You've got your assets, which is sort of like the logo, SVG, so on. You've got like a public folder, which has got like the favicon. And yeah, I'll just bring up a terminal. I'm hoping I actually did this, but I might have forgotten to do this. Implements it all, sorry. And then you've got like your app.vue, which is sort of like your main Vue file. And this is where I'll be sort of doing most of the code, and then I'll be importing some components that I'm going to create in a second. Sorry, I forgot to do this. Hopefully that doesn't take long. Cool. I'll clear that. Run dev. Alright, so this is probably going to complain saying there is nothing on the application itself. Yep. Okay. So just quickly going to create a, where did the setup tag? I'm just going to move this to the top. Just get rid of that. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, just bring this up as well, is I'm going to get rid of this div and just use the main tag instead. And I'm going to have like a heading or a header tag, and then just have a title or h1 using a h1 called jobs board. Can't spell. There. Alright. Does that work now? Yep. Okay, so there we go. That's our title. Oh, sorry. And I'm going to just put this inside of a div so I'm going to apply some styling to certain elements that I add to it. So basically, we're going to have like a heading, and then I'm going to have a button which is going to sort of toggle like a search bar that's going to appear under the heading, which you can then search for jobs. And then I'm going to import the JSON file that I had and basically try to display the jobs that already exist. So the first thing I'm going to do is just build out like the title, the button, and the search bar. So we've already got the title. I'm going to just give this a class called container. We've already got, and then I'm going to use an input tag for the like the search bar. Type is the type of text. Sorry. Placeholder is just going to say search. I'm going to use a capital S. Cool. Did something go wrong? What went wrong here? Yeah, don't need to do that. So, yep, there we go. We've got like a little search bar, we've got the title, and I'll apply some styling in a second. I will just add the button as well. So this is just going to be like a button, and what this is going to do is basically just toggle the search bar. So we're going to make it appear and disappear. Did I spell that right? Alright, I'm going to apply some styling. So basically the style, you noticed here that the style tag is like an attribute to it, so it's scoped. Basically what that will do is just apply it to this single file component. It's not going to apply the styling to like other components and stuff that you import. Yeah, so it's only going to keep it to these elements in here instead. So I created a class called container. To that container I'm going to use a flexbox. I'm just going to quickly go over this. I'm not going to go into too much detail. Justify content. I'm going to spread it apart. Did I do that correctly? Yep, cool. And then align items. Align it to the center, and then I'm going to apply some margin. 0 to, cool. Yep, so there we go, I've applied a bit of margin, I've spaced it out, so I've got like the title and the search bar, and then the button out here. Okay, so that's that. Now what will we do next? I think what I'm going to do next, oh actually, before I do that, I'll just apply this to the, I'm just going to give the main tag height and width, view height, view width. Okay. Does that make sense so far, or am I going too fast? Does that all make sense? Yep. All right. So what I'm going to do now, I think what I'm going to do now is, I think firstly, I think what I'll do is actually, yeah, toggle the search bar. So we don't want this, like, I guess for this case, we don't want this search bar to always be there. So I'm going to make it appear and disappear using what's known as conditional rendering in Vue. So back in the slides, you may have seen like the v if tag. So I'm going to be using that. So firstly, I am going to use so I'm actually going to import the ref function to create a piece of state to sort of like handle or basically handle making that search bar appear and disappear. I'm going to call it something like const show search, which equals to ref. So by default, I'm going to give it a Boolean value of false. So by default, we don't want it actually to be there. And if I actually console log this ref or this show search state, console, you'll notice that it's actually an object, and inside of the object we'll basically be targeting this key value pair. So it's called value, and then we're assigning, like, the value that it's assigned is the value that I assigned in that function, so false by default, or not false by default, false is the value I applied to it. So this is how it sort of works. I'll be targeting this mainly. Okay. So now what we need to do is when we click on the button, we need to somehow change this value. So we want to, actually, before I do that, I need to actually hide it. So the way to do it is using conditional rendering, as I said before. So there's a directive known as vif. So basically what we're telling Vue is only render this application if this value is true. So we're going to basically just apply, using a string, just apply or assign the show search state to it, like this. And as you can see, it's no longer there because the value is false. Now what I'm going to do is when we click on this button, we want it to show that search bar. So the way to do it is first I'm actually going to create a function called const toggle search. I'm going to use arrow functions. Does anyone not know what arrow functions are, or can I go ahead with it? Okay, well, it's basically just like it's like so instead of okay, well, I guess I'll do it this way. If I do function toggle search, so that's normally how you write functions in JavaScript. There's instead of that, I can actually assign the function to a variable instead, doing it this way. Toggle search, and then it equals a function and uses like an arrow syntax, and that's basically equivalently the same as doing what I did before. So that's what arrow functions are. It's basically just a JavaScript function. Now, so when this function is run, what we want to do is change this value from false to true. So I am going to first try to, what I'm going to do is set that value. So I'm going to go call search, show search dot value. As I said before, that's how you actually access that, that value that I assigned it. And then I could either, what I'm going to actually do is invert it or inverse it. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just telling it assign this, assign or change this to the inverse of what it was before. So that's what this exclamation mark does. So if it was false, now it's going to become true, and vice versa. And then in Vue, you can like add event listeners using what's a directive known as v-on. So I can add an event listener to the button. So when like an event listener such as like a click event. So when the button is clicked on, the listener will fire. So the way to do it is I can do something like v-on and then click equals. And then I'm basically just telling it, providing it the function name, so toggle search. So now, hopefully this works. There we go. And then there's also a shorthand format of actually using v-on, so you don't actually have to write it out like this. You can use the @ symbol instead, and that should do the exact same thing like this. Cool. Does that make sense? Yep. All right. And now what I'm going to do is render out the jobs that I had got in the JSON file. So what I'm going to do is create another div. Just give it a class called card container. I'm just going to style that so I don't forget. Basically, all that's going to do display flex. I'm going to use a flex box, and basically these cards are just like, they're going to be cards basically. So I'm going to use what's known as like the flex wrap property of the flex box. So like when I change like the screen size, it's going to like adjust it appropriately. So move it. So if they're all in a row, we adjust the screen size. It's going to move them into like a column or move them one by one underneath each other. That's basically what this is doing. And I'm going to apply a margin to the top because we'll see in a second why. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is instead of coding out the cards or rendering out the cards in the app.vue file, I'm going to actually create a component instead. So I'm going to create a new file, call it jobscard or jobcard.vue. Nope, the setup. Just going to copy this to the top. Get rid of that. Okay, and I will import that in to my app.vue file. Jobs card from. Components. Yeah, so I'm basically just importing that component into my main file. I'm also going to import the JSON data that I have. So I'm going to import jobs data from. It's going to be inside of the data folder. Jobs.json. There we go. And then I'm actually going to assign that to a piece of state. So I'm going to call it const jobs. I'm going to use the ref function again, and you can basically just assign it like that. Now, what I'm going to do is, inside of this div, render out the card. So I'm going to use the component that I had imported and place it inside of this div. For now, I'll just do that. So as you notice here before, these are like many jobs, so I'm not just going to grab it one by one. I'm going to actually iterate through them instead. And the way to do that in Vue is using another directive known as v-for. So you're basically looping through each of them, and I'm going to send it to this component using props instead. So the way to do that is basically call the v-for directive, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one by one, or loop through them one by one. So for job, the way to do it is like this is the piece of state, and then I'm grabbing each job individually. So for job in jobs, this is actually complaining because when you use the v-for directive, you actually need to provide it an ID or a key. And the key I'm going to use is the ID of each of the jobs. I've just incremented them 1, 2, 3, 4. So key equals to, and then I can access the ID just by calling it like this, so job.id. So this is each job's individual ID. Now what I can do is, so I will need to pass, so as you can see here, I've got like the ID, the company logo, the company name, the title, the date, and so on. So I need to somehow provide this component with those values. I could provide it like one by one, so I could do something like this, where I could have a prop, so prop like company logo or something like this, equals to job.company logo. But the way I'm actually going to do is just provide the entire object to this component. And what this syntax here is known as like a v-bind. And basically what this is doing, is telling Vue, is instead of treating it as like a HTML attribute, it's telling it to be in sync with that value that I'm passing in. So basically it's just applying JavaScript logic instead of treating it as like a HTML attribute. So unlike something like type equals text or placeholder, it means something else. So what I'll do actually is create a prop called job, and I'm just going to pass that job object to it instead. And then inside of here, I need to define that prop that I've passed in. So I'm just going to, so I'm going to use the define props. So equals to define props. And as I said in the slides as it showed, you can just provide an array with the prop name. You can call it something like props like this, but then this is technically an object. So if I want to access it in my template, I would have to use like, I would have to use the property on it. So I would have to do something like props.job if I want to reference everything inside of it. What I can do instead is destructure it. So I will destructure it out of the object. So that allows me to access it just like this. If I want an ID, I can just do job.id, job.company logo, and so on. What we can do now is implement the template and the styling. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. So I'm just going to call this class equals to card. I'm going to have an image tag for the logo of the company. I'll just do source equals to that for now. Then I'm going to have another div for all the title. Did that do something wrong? What am I doing? Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, and then in here, I'm just going to have, so now I can access like all the properties of this object, so the company name, title, the date when it was posted. So what I can do is I'm just going to have like a h2 tag for the title of the company, so I can access it like this, as I said before in the Slides, yeah, to access state, we can use the double curly brackets. So job dot company name, like that. I can do h4, job dot title, and then I will use like a p tag for the date it was posted. So date posted, and then I have space, so job dot date, and then I will apply some quick styles. So I have a class called card. I will just give it a width of, I'm just going to hard code it, 250 pixels. Overflow hidden. I'm just going to, so basically what I'm doing here with overflow hidden is I'm going to hide the scroll bars. I'm going to apply a border radius. So we'll give the card basically like a rounded corners. So border radius of 2% or something. What's happened here actually? Okay, overflow hidden. I'm going to just give it a margin bottom of 35 pixels. Margin right of 20 pixels. Cursor, so basically, probably don't need this actually, it doesn't really matter. And I will give it a padding, so internal padding of 5 pixels and just have a border around it so you guys can see each individual card. Just going to rush through that. And then with the image, I'm just going to, pretty sure I can do that. I'm just going to give it a width of 100%. Okay, so hopefully, alright. So with the source tag, so normally if I've got like an image, if I've got like an image stored in one of like the public folder or in assets, I could like try to find it in the file structure. But because this has been passed in through a prop, you're going to have to use like the vbind again. So I'm going to use like the vbind source equals to job dot company logo, like that instead. So why have these not started to render? Jobs dot view job. Please complain about it. Have they not started to render? It's interesting. Sorry, just give me a second. What's gone wrong here? I know what's happened. I need to define it properly. There we go. Yep, there we go. So these are our jobs. I had to use fake company names instead of real ones, but yeah, so it's basically render them out. If I try to resize, that's going to wrap them. Hopefully, yep, as I said before, it moves them underneath each other, like that. And yeah, so that's how we render out the cards. And the last little feature I'm going to implement is searching for a particular job. So the way to do that in Vue is, so we'll go back to the app.vue file. Sorry, just give me a second. I'm going to import a function, but before I do that, I'm going to create a piece of state called const search, and just give, and the value of that state is just going to be an empty string. And then I'm going to use a new directive known as vmodel. So vmodel is like another directive in Vue, and basically what this is doing is a two-way data bind. So in this input field, if I type in something, what that's going to do is apply whatever I've typed in to this piece of state here. So this, instead of it being an empty string, it'll be whatever I've typed in. And then if I remove whatever I've typed, it'll go back to an empty string. So that's the two-way data bind. So I go to vmodel, and again, I'll just I'll assign it the name of the state in a string. So search, like that. Now, what we want to do is we want to somehow we want to somehow see like whenever, because we want to render the jobs that people like search for. So we don't want it to be showing all the jobs that I've like looped through. And the way to do that is using what's known as like a watch function. So I'm watching on a piece of state, and based off that, I'm going to do some sort of what the Vue docs called a side effect. So I'm going to then render those particular jobs. Does that make sense? Yep. So we're going to import that in Vue, or from Vue, like that. And what I can do is then, so the watch function, what it takes is like the first parameter is going to be the name of the piece of state, so the state itself, which is search. And then it's going to use what's known as a callback function. So callback functions are functions that are called after something has been completed. So the way to do it is like this, using arrow functions. And what we're going to do is filter for those jobs based on like the value that the user has typed in. And the way to do that is so what I'll do is I will assign, so jobs.value, so I'll assign like the value or of this state to be a filtered, I'm going to use like a array method, which is basically returns like a filtered array, and I'm going to assign that filtered array to that piece of state. So I'm going to call that original array, which is jobs data, which I've imported from here. I've imported here. I'm going to filter it like this, jobs.data filter. And what this is going to do is iterate over each job in this JSON data. And what I'm going to look for, what I'm going to look for is if the title of this object includes whatever the user has typed in, then what this will do is then create a new array and pass it to this state. So let's try that out. If I search for, oh, actually, I know why. I need to, before I do that, I need to convert everything to lowercase. So I'm going to convert everything to lowercase like this, dot includes, and I convert whatever the user has typed in, search dot, I forgot to use value, yep, to lowercase as well. So if I toggle the search button, or click on the search button, if I search for like DevOps engineer, then it'll only pick out the DevOps engineer. If I want backend, front end, if I use lowercase, that's how you sort of filter for jobs. And yeah, that sort of brings the end to the demo. Thank you. I'll just quickly go back to the slides before I end the presentation. So, slideshow. So what's next? Yeah, just keep working on issues, and if you guys need help, reach out to the CFC team or any of the project helpers. Some useful resources to learn Vue. I've also linked the documentary. Have you guys actually seen the documentary? There's a Vue documentary on YouTube. I recommend checking that out. It goes through what sort of like the background and history of Vue. Yeah, thanks for listening. I think Chantelle's got something she wants to demo as well, so I'll pass it over to Chantelle.
So I'm going to talk about store managers and the Vue DevOps tool. They're both important part of Vue's like developer lifecycle. So just briefly talk about what the store does. So the store allows you to centralize your data and functions across multiple components and pages. And then also the DevOps tool helps you to debug any problems or bugs that you might find, and it makes it easier for you rather than console logging your problems. Okay, so this is a little app that I made. I'm using the Pokemon API, which is free. Highly recommend it, it's very cool. So previously Vue had used Vuex as the store manager tool, but as of lately, according to the Vue documentation, Pinia is the recommended store manager tool because Vuex is currently in maintenance mode, and it's extremely complicated for beginners to learn. I know it took me maybe a couple of weeks to understand it, but Pinia is very simple to learn. Okay. So I'm just going to show you what a store looks like for Vuex. I'm going to use the WACE example because it is extremely long and messy. As you can see, it just goes on and on and on. With Vuex, you can only have one store, and if you wanted to separate it, you have to separate it into modals. Whereas Pinia allows you to have multiple stores, which you can separate through different files, and it's a lot simpler to read. And as you can see, it is a mess, and it just goes on and on and on, which is extremely hard for beginners to learn. So then I'll just show you an example of Pinia's store. So you can define a store here. So I've just got a Pokemon store, and then these two states are the ones that I want to keep track across my websites and component. And then here I have an action which you can get the Pokemon from the API, fetch it from the API. And then I have a few more actions to add a Pokemon, which will add it to the state, and then remove Pokemon from my state as well. And then a getter that will just tell me how many Pokemon I have. So as you can see, it's very simple compared to the other one. I'm just going to demo the project at the moment before I go into the DevTools. So here's all my Pokemon. I can click them to say that I caught it, and you can see up the top here that my component is reactive, so it's reacting to all my click events straight away. And then if I go back, you can see that you can grab all my Pokemon are here now, and I can also click and remove. Okay. One downside of the store is that if I do end up refreshing, your store will clear as well. So that's when a database or a JSON file or local storage would come in handy. Cool. So I'm just so this is Vue's Devtools. It's a free extension for your browser. You can see my states on the side here. So you've got my list of Pokemon, and then the Pokemon that I caught, and then also a getter, which return the number of Pokemon I have. And you can see that updates in real time. So if you have any bugs and you find your state isn't updating, you can check Vue Store to see if it's actually adding to the store or not. And then apart from being able to see your store, you can also view your components, and you can see all your components listed in the DOM. So you can make sure that everything's rendering right. And then another cool thing is there's a timeline. So this registers every click event. So you see the purple dots, that's all my clicks. And then the yellow is what's happening in my store. So that's mutating the store. So I'm adding and removing Pokemon. And then down here, if it wants to come up. And yeah, down here you can just see it's not adding. Okay. Yeah, normally it says whether it's the start of the mutation or end, or if it's during. I don't know why I can't get that up. But yeah, that is just a brief demo into the component and Pinia. Let me just show you how to access the store from a file. So come into the header. So I just have my setup script here. And then I am grabbing the Pokemon store and destructuring the store from here. And then I want to that's me like creating the store on this component, and then I go store to reference to deconstruct my getter, which is the get total Pokemon. I think I can also destruct my Pokemon as well. So that's like the list of Pokemon, and then my Pokemon, which is all my Pokemon. That just allows you to just type in get total Pokemon rather than stored Pokemon. So this would still work the exact same if I had it like that, but it just makes like the template cleaner up the top here. Yeah, so that was just my little demo. That's all I wanted to show. It's highly recommended that you download Vue Devtools, and yeah, it helped me a lot learning Vue, and yeah, I hope it does the same for you. That's it.